Hey, this is Ciderhelm. In this movie I'm going to be covering the concepts of map control in the context of warding, counter-warding, and the use of clairvoyance. In the first section I'm going to cover tips and strategy, while the second section will cover specific locations. If you enjoy this guide, take a look at LearnTheLeague.com and consider picking up my full League of Legends book. Being able to see and actively track your opponents on the game map can provide a massive advantage to your team, provided your team will make use of the vision. It allows you to push, engage in teamfights, and take objectives like Dragon and Baron Nashor based on real information, not just perception. By the same token, preventing your opponents from seeing and tracking your team will put them at a disadvantage. Green Sight Wards and Pink Vision Wards can both be purchased from the Consumable tab in the shop. Sight Wards cost 75 gold and offer normal vision in an area around where they're placed. Vision Wards cost 125 gold and offer both normal vision and stealth detection in an area around where they're placed. Both types of wards have a 3-minute duration and can be killed with 3 normal attacks. The duration of an allied ward can be checked at any time by clicking the ward and looking at the resource bar. This is a countdown timer that lists the remaining time in seconds. When placed, they are briefly visible and targetable to enemies, meaning they can be killed if nearby opponents react quickly. Wards can be placed a moderate distance away from your champion, allowing you to place them over walls. The stealth detection from vision wards allows them to see stealth units, including champions and placeable objects such as other wards. However, if a vision ward is placed outside of a bush, that ward will not grant vision on stealth units inside the bush, even if vision is granted in the bush through other means. Oracle's Elixir is a 400 gold consumable that grants stealth detection to the player who purchases it. This buff lasts until the player dies. Like vision wards, you will need to be inside a bush to see stealth units within the bush, regardless of whether you have vision in the bush from other sources. Allied wards are considered valid units for the Teleport Summoner spell. Using Teleport clearly gives away the location of the ward to any opponents who are paying attention to the area, but also makes the ward invulnerable. This can be used to your advantage in securing kills on Dragon and Baron Nashor, particularly if a player on the other side of the map has teleport available, and can turn the tides of a fight in your favor. In some circumstances, it can be a good method of getting a player near the enemy base quickly to take down a structure before the team can react. There are also a few champions, such as Jax, Lee Sin, and Katarina, who can use abilities to dash towards. If you're playing these champions, it's often a good idea to carry at least one ward with you for this purpose. If you're playing on the same team as them, keep it in mind if you need to help them escape in a pinch. And if you're playing against them, you'll want to be more vigilant about destroying enemy wards when possible. Warding is the process of increasing your own map vision and map awareness through the use of wards. Counter-warding is a process of removing your opponent's map vision and map awareness by getting rid of their wards. Counter-warding is important so long as it offers a tangible advantage to your team. If your team will not or cannot realistically use it to their advantage, getting rid of a ward is a costly investment. If you're using a vision ward, you'll be paying a premium. If you're using Oracle's Elixir, you'll be putting it at risk if you move significantly out of position to destroy the ward. What amounts to a tangible advantage? In the early game, it can mean being able to push and zone your opponents more effectively because they're afraid of being ganked. Being able to engage Dragon and Baron Nashor before your opponents are aware, or in such a way that they cannot guess how much health these monsters have while you're fighting them, is an advantage. In this case, I recommend warding before these objectives become available in the mid and late game, as it will give you warning if a team is aware of the timer and is preparing to fight them the moment they respawn. In the early game, counter-warding tends to be specific, and pink vision wards are often suited to this. As the game progresses, denying more vision across the map allows your team more latitude and better opportunities, and this is where Oracle's Elixir tends to be more effective. Counter-warding is virtually always good in game, but is often not necessary for every single ward. Don't put yourself in a position where you're being baited into bad situations by counter-warding wards that you didn't need to take out. Both warding and counter-warding are mind games, and the better you shut down your opponent's vision while increasing your own, the more your team can engage based on reality, while your opponents must engage based on perception. Make sure you carefully check for enemy wards as you pass through a bush while you have Oracle's Elixir active. If you're moving quickly and are watching other events, you can miss wards that will only pop up for a half second or so. Be deliberative when moving between bushes to make sure you're not missing anything. Towers are naturally defensible, providing strong area vision and high damage output. In balanced fights, towers are safe havens and fallback points that allow for extension in the area around them. Losing or destroying a tower can completely shift the balance in a match in terms of vision and map awareness. Not only do you lose the vision of the tower, but you also lose the easy fallback position that makes nearby warding much safer for your team. If you lose a tower, take extra steps to ensure you have vision in the area. You cannot safely extend until you do. On the flip side, if you take a tower, take extra steps to destroy any wards they may try to place, as this turns a large area on their side of the map into a hostile territory for them. This prevents them from easily farming, can offer you more gank opportunities, and can allow your team to more easily push the next tower in their lane. Understanding the effects of down towers and map vision helps to understand one of the broader concepts of map control. While the map is easily divided into two halves, it is better to think of it in terms of smaller zones. Let's say the purple team, which resides on the top half of the map, has lost their bottom lane tower. As soon as this happens, a whole region around that tower, including their blue golem buff, suddenly becomes vulnerable. Losing the vision and safety from the tower is not only a real tangible loss of safety, but also means that players on the purple team have a lot more to fear. To counter this, they will need ward vision out to the river. Now let's take this one step further and say the purple team also loses their mid tower. Once this happens, the entire area between the two towers, including blue golem and the 3 wolf pack, is completely vulnerable to purple team. They will need at least 2 wards to be safely in this area, and will have less time to react to them as the wards need to be placed in more tightly to cover the entrances. Losing mid tower has the greatest negative impact in terms of map zones, as it affects both red buff and blue buff, along with Dragon and Baron Nashor and the length of the river. If you've lost this tower, you'll want to do more to recover vision in this area. If you've taken this tower, your team should usually be aggressive in asserting your presence in the vulnerable zones. Remember, this is largely a mind game, and your goal is to give them the perception that you're in control of their territory. Map zones overlap each other and are extended further depending on your vision and the champions in that area. For example, purple team's mid lane and bottom lane affect how vulnerable their blue golem buff is, and champions who can move extremely quickly can assert control over more of this territory. Response time and quickly countering players entering your territory is important to maintaining control. Vision does not matter if you're not going to react to someone entering your territory. The main map zones are as follows. Top and bottom river. This is controlled primarily with wards. Middle, covering both red buff and blue buff. Top, crossing over to the red buff for purple team, and crossing over to the blue buff for blue team. Bottom, crossing over to the blue buff for purple team, and crossing over to the red buff for blue team. Because of the shape of the map, the second set of towers offers very little map control, even in the interior regions. If you're on the offense, this means taking down the outer towers can fairly easily give you complete map control of their territory. If your own towers have been taken, wards are usually necessary to safely move in your interior. The players responsible for warding is a team decision. However, it is very common to see support players responsible for the bulk of warding, with a jungling champion helping out. In this setup, other team members are usually responsible for warding and protecting their own lane, particularly if they're alone in the lane. Your opponents may choose to gank based on how ineffective they believe you will be at preventing a kill. For example, if the bottom lane is well warded by your team, even counter-warded, and gank attempts have been unsuccessful, that region is higher risk for your opponents. Even if they don't get killed themselves, they may be wasting time with relatively little to show for it. When this happens, the middle and top lanes will become higher priority for your opponents, provided they aren't equally well defended. This is why it can be very important, especially in the early and mid game, to make sure you're controlling vision on areas of the map where a support or other player may not be in a position to provide wards themselves. Keep this rule in mind. If you don't die because you placed a ward, that ward paid for itself several times over. While you may feel it is ideal to use your gold elsewhere, you should invest in wards whenever necessary. Warding is important, but there is such a thing as too much warding. You will need to balance the contribution that more wards has to your team versus the risk you're taking by not investing in items that benefit your team in skirmishes and teamfights. Simply placing wards, particularly alone, may leave you at a distance or bad entrance to fights that may be coming up. Provided you are generating a decent amount of gold, such as with a Philosopher's Stone and Heart of Gold, a good rule of thumb is that you should be purchasing at least 2 wards when you go back to base, but maybe going overboard if you purchase 5, unless you've got a specific reason, such as extended Baron control. This is situational, and it depends on whether your teammates are also helping with vision. Having vision is amazing, but if your team is losing fights without gaining objectives, it won't amount to anything. Make sure you're not hindering your team.